Hey, Francisco. Rob's here.
Hey, Rob, can you see my screen?
Not yet. Now I can.
Oh, I'm getting some feedback in the mic.
From me?
Not sure.
Here, I'll mute.
I'm on mute? No.
No, I said I'll mute myself, try talking, and see if it still feeds back.
Yeah, no feedback. Oh, no, I still got some feedback here, but that's okay. We should work. Hey, good morning, everyone. Francisco Otero here. We'll start our presentation in 2 minutes. Thank you. Weird.
Everything sounds good on this end.
Yeah.
By the way,
okay.
There's no echo here.
Nothing? Okay, good. Yeah, I'm getting a little clicking. Looks like Morse code in my in my headset here. Something is interfering, but that's okay. All manageable.
Gotcha.
Folks, we'll start in 1 minute. We'll start at 12:02. All right, 12:02, time to get started. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Francisco Otero here. Today we are going to cover pivCLASS software and hardware. So this is the federal government ACM solution to integrate our access control with the government requirements. I put it that part one. We probably gonna need to stretch this out to probably 2 or 3 parts. I want to cover the basics today. Then gonna need probably another session just to continue a little bit more on that, and then maybe a third session. We'll see how that goes. Second or third session to cover the information itself, to cover how the application, show you the application, and give you a live view. So today, unfortunately, is going to be heavily on PowerPoint. So sorry, I hate to do that, but there's not a whole lot of ways around that, so we're gonna need to do it. So here's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna talk about CodeBench, the designer, the developer, the company who put together the application that we're going to talk about, some of the government standards, and we'll talk about the product descriptions, cases, and how we integrate with all this government solution. So let's start with CodeBench. So CodeBench was a company that back in 2001 started in Florida, and they were a software design. These people came off of an access control company. They create their own company to do some middleware interface between access control and other types of applications. And they had over 30 access controls that they interacted with. And then back in those days, in 2004, they created what is called pivCheck software. This was a suite of software package that is designed to respond to the requirements from the HSDP, or the Homeland Security Presidential Directive number 12. We're going to cover that in a second. So then in 2012, they were doing so great that HID decided to go after and purchase the company. And from that point, they rebranded from pivCheck to pivCLASS. So if you hear any of those two terms, basically they mean the same today. So it was pivCheck in the past, and now it's pivCLASS. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at that. So some of the standards here for government and some of the background and and where we are today with identification and so on. So the government back in 2004 created what's called the Homeland Security Presidential Directive number 12, and there was a initiative to standardize all federal and federal employees and contractors identification. So they want to have a standard identification of all those employees across the board, because it was pretty much it was a hodgepodge of everything. So that was put together, and then in 2006, 2 years later, FIPS came to be, which define the personal identification verification, PIV. So this is defining how that identification had to be and what it would have in the identification format and things like that. So and throughout that time frame, so if you look the dates in here, so FIPS 201-1 came in 2006, was revised as 201-2 in 2013. And if you look at the other dates in this page, you see that this is a still going, right? Started in 2004, and even in 2018, we had a new update in some of the policies and how the government wants to handle all that. So the idea is, why the government put this together is to simplify the identification process of the federal employees and their contractors. One set, one type of identification, and that identification provides a set of information that can be validated and provide that to all the employees. So NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, came up with the FIPS 201, and the idea was to create a card format and information inside of that encrypted container that was standardized across all the government agencies. How do you come up with an identity that can be utilized by all their employees? So then what they did is they designed some different types of identities. They perform, or they have the same types of information. They will provide the same type of identification, but with focus in different agencies and their needs. So PIV is a pretty standard one. So that's the personal identity verification card. Government agencies and contractors utilize that. The TWIC, second one in there, is for transportation workers, and usually it's used around ports and petrochemical plants. So just to give an idea, I went to the nearest port over here, and I went there and registered, and they did a background check, and now I have a valid TWIC card. I obviously don't use much other than using that to test on my access control, which was basically the whole purpose why I went and did that. So I do have a valid federal government identification card that I can use to access ports if I need it. If I was working in a port, that would be a way of identifying me or a person who using that card. CAC is used by the Department of Defense, so all the military personnel use a CAC card. FRAC and PIV and CIV are other types of cards. Again, they might look slightly different. It's the same type of smart card. They will have maybe just different ways of presenting information in those cards, but at the end, again, is a federal identification card. Okay. So let's take a look. So what is this software package goal? So first and foremost, validate the card, validate the FIPS 201 card owner, right? So how do I know that that person holding that card is the rightful owner? How do I validate that? So the software primary focus is to do that. And once I do that, once I know that, yes, this is the person who's supposed to have this card, how do I ensure that that card is still valid? So that's the certificate revocation list. So the card can be checked against a government database to validate and make sure that that card is not stolen, expired, or just being revoked because the person no longer works there. Okay. And also gives you the ability to import information from that card into an access control system, in this case, ACM. And we'll cover that in just a little bit. I'll show a little bit more about that. And one of the important things is this has to some way, somehow incorporate an existing access control. So it's a module that I can connect to an existing access control system to facilitate the integration from what the government or the federal government requires, right? So I need to authenticate this employee that are coming to this facility. And from that point on, now that I have registered, that I know this employee is holding a legit card and is the rightful owner of that card, and the card is still valid, I can now let this person go in and open doors inside my facility. And that's using the access control. So those are parts of this software suite, the PIV class, that we're going to cover. So this is why I'm dividing this in a couple of sessions, just because it's a whole lot and I don't want to just cramp everything in one session and have to fly through it. And so we're going to go ahead and cover that. So let's take a look here, a few more things. So the suite is modular in nature because it was a requirement from the government. So the government agency doesn't have to buy everything. They can start with just a couple of components of this module just to basically register and validate personnel if they want to do that. And then they can purchase as they go, right? As the budget comes up, they can go and add other modules and increase the level of security of their system. All the software comes with a first year maintenance plan already included. Additional maintenance plan have to be purchased, and the customer will receive a notification 60 days prior from the expiration of the software. They'll receive an email notification on that. Okay. Here are some of those modules. So the pivCLASS desktop software. So you see there's two versions. There's a desktop and there's a mobile. I'm going to focus in the desktop because by far is the one that we receive more requests from. Mobile, I'm yet to receive a request. I think it's very specific depending on what agency and what facility, what they're trying to do. They might use that. In most part, it's been the desktop version. And they have a couple of modules in there. So the validation workstation right there, so ensures that the card owner, right? So it looks into the card and verifies the authenticity of that card. Is this person holding this card the owner of this card? Has this card been revoked? For the same things I explained before, is the card expired, or the person does no longer work there, or the person lost the card, right? Someone found this card and now goes to an agency. You have to validate, you have to present the card and goes through this validation process. We'll show you in just a little bit how that looks like. At this point, this validation workstation is not connected to the access control. It's just validating the card, making sure that that person holding the card is the owner of that card. So that is the card itself, then there is a PIN number associated with that and fingerprint associated, even a photo. So the photo is stored in the card. So when the card is verified, you can pull the photo and authenticate and do other things. We'll cover that in just a little bit. So again, at this point, we're not talking about the access control yet. So that's the validation workstation. Then the registration engine is where after I have that card validated and authenticated, then I can opt to register that person in the access control. And then we can move the information, we can gather some information of that card and enter that directly in the access control. Another module is the ID publisher. Also, we don't use that a whole lot. This depends on the customer. And the ID publisher, basically what it does is allows you to grab data from a third-party software or a third-party database and validate, authenticate those feeds, authenticate the people before you add them into your system, before you add into the access control. As I said, we haven't seen a whole lot of movement around the ID publisher, Most of the time we're looking at is the validation workstation, the registration engine, and a few other things. The next item there, the pivCLASS certificate manager. What it does is once I read that card, once I validate that card for the first time, now the card is in my system. Well, how do I ensure that that card is still valid? How do I ensure that that card is not expired or the person lost the card and failed to communicate back to this agency, back to this facility? So the certificate manager goes out to this government database and validates that card, the cards that they have in their database, the cards that is in that access control in their own system, in the validation workstation. What they will do is it will go out in usually by default is anywhere between 12 to 18 hours. It goes out and validates those numbers. And if it finds a card that's been revoked, it will go into the access control system and it will disable that card in our system. Okay, so that happens automatically behind the scenes. So pretty good feature and is one that is necessary. So that's a component that is necessary in there. Okay, is the certificate manager. Then after that, reader services. So the reader services is the ability to incorporate the reader. So we're talking about HID readers. So those are the readers that are at the doors, right? And how do I ensure that that card, that person that's presenting the card to that door is authentic and the reader or the card is still valid? So there's a couple of things or a couple of options in there, but the reader certificate basically manages two different types. There's more, but let's talk about the ones that we support. There's two different types of devices. One that is the PAM, which is a device that you can connect a reader to it, and this device alone, once you present the card, will communicate with the database and will validate that card. So that is, if you don't have what's showing up here or down here is the LP 4500. So that's another option. The 4500 Mercury controller has a PAM built in. So even before, so when you present the card, it will validate with the PAM. And if the PAM come back and says this card is invalid, the person don't even get in. The access control will receive a notification that this card is invalid and the person cannot even get into that facility. And this is happening outside of the access control. So this is validating the card before we transmit the information to the access control. Okay, so that's the PAM and the Mercury LP 4500. We will cover this in details in the session when we actually touch the hardware. It will probably be the next or the following session. So I'll probably do like 3 sessions on this just to cover all the material. This is somewhat, I don't want to use the word boring, but we need to cover this just to understand the basics of it. And it's PowerPoint heavy. So again, sorry for that, but we'll continue doing here. And in one of the sessions, we'll do a live demonstration of how this works. Okay. All right. Next item here is the mobile software. Basically works the same way that the desktop version works, but this will be for personnel that are in maybe a lobby that you have a lot of people coming in and you want to validate those workers. So think about a command center for, an emergency command center, right? Is a place where you don't use a whole lot, but when it's activated from some sort of natural disaster or some type of emergency, then you have that influx of people and you want to validate that. If it's in the federal level, you want to validate that, then the mobile validator would provide that additional manpower to be at a lobby or an entrance or whatever it is to validate people quicker. Okay, so that's just a different option for the same validation. All right, next one here. So here's some of the use case for the validation workstation. So the validation workstation is not necessarily connected to the access control. The idea behind this validation is I have let's say a lobby that is a federal employee that's coming to my facility, and I want to validate that person. So the person would go in and present the card, and this is some of the equipment that you see in here. Excuse me. You would see basically a scanner, a card reader, a smart card reader with an option for a keypad and also a biometric sensor so we can read fingerprints. Okay, so those things will allow a federal agents to validate someone that is coming through their facility, and basically looks like this. The person comes in, presents the card to this reader, so it's an insert slot, so you insert the card and you have to enter that person has to enter the PIN number associated with the card. So when you receive this card, like I received my TWIC card, it was a PIN number associated with it. And in that same card there is a photo there and also the fingerprint algorithm. So it has all in the card. So when validating this, you could use those three methods or maybe just two. For example, in my demo system here, I can only use two. I don't have the scanner fingerprint. So I can validate the card with the PIN number, and that's okay. So it goes out and validates. So what this application is doing is checking for this person's name, card, the PIN number associated with the card, and the fingerprint to validate the person. And here's the photo of that person that is in the card. And then it gives you the expiration of the card, the name of the person, agency, and a few other things. Okay, so this fast scan here is it's the number of the card, and based on this information and some other information in here, the card number is built, which guarantees that the card number is never duplicated. Okay, so there is all sorts of algorithms happening behind the scenes on this for that card number to be valid, to be authenticated, and to be displayed properly like you see in here. So this is just the validation piece. Okay, and to do that, this is some of the equipment. This is evolving. There is other different types of equipment out there today, but basically you got a card reader right there, a smart card reader that can read that card and enter a PIN number. This one doesn't have a PIN number in particular. You would use the PIN number on the keyboard. And then this would read, as a USB base, you would read the fingerprint, okay? And so that's basically how you grab the data, right? So there's basically two ways of registering a card. You can either do, and this is probably the one that we all going to see the most, is you harvest the data from the card itself by presenting the card, enter the PIN number and the fingerprint, validate the card, and then if the card is validated, then we can go and register that card into the access control as a valid card, and here is the card number. Okay, so that's one method, is right here, either using the desktop or the mobile version. And then the other method is with the ID publisher, where I can grab a feed from existing data, validate that, and add to the access control. Okay, so those are the two methods. Basically, it's this: you have a card, you look at that card, then it checks against the government database. If it's valid, it goes ahead and register that card into the access control. Also, what we could do after that is it's validating those cards, it's constantly checking against the government database to make sure that that card is still valid, is not lost or expired, and if so, then you would go to the access control and disable that. So all that communication happening between the access and the validation stations and the government database, now that is all encrypted. So there is a great deal of configuration for SSL certificates and other things to make sure that all that information is protected. So when we send this information out to be checked against the government database, it's all encrypted, it's all SSL encrypted to guarantee security of that. Okay, so in a nutshell, that's how this looks like. And once again, Person presents the card to the reader, enter the PIN number, enters the fingerprint, and if it's validated, then you will see something like this. So this is a actual card. It's a TWIC card, similar to the one that I have. And this is the module in top of that validation, that verification process. This is the registration. This is the module that is specific to ACM access control that will, after this card is properly validated, we can then go and register that into ACM. Okay. And here is how that looks like in ACM. So what are we gathering in ACM? Once again, either using the desktop version of registration engine or the mobile version. I can then send that information to the ACM. It will grab the person's photo, first, last name, expiration date of the card, and the card number. And I can also then give this person access to the facilities, and now that person can use their, in this case here, a TWIC card, go into that reader and present that and open the door. Be aware of this, depending what type of authentication method the customer wants at the readers, this process can take a couple of seconds, right? So if I just present my card and all I'm interested in is using the government card, reading just the number of the card and using that in the access control, then it will be a relatively easy and fast process. Presents the card, reads the card, card's okay, goes to the access control, here's the card, and go ahead and open the door. Now, if they want to have at the reader, right? So not just registration, but throughout the facility. If you have readers where you have to present the card, enter the PIN number, or any combination of that, this process obviously is going to take longer. So you wouldn't put this on the main entrance of a federal building with the turnstiles or everybody's on the outside, right? The lines will become very, very long, right? So it really depends on what type of authentication, what type of verification that particular government agency, that particular location is looking for. We've seen many different things. We've seen ones that don't even want to authenticate because it's a low security. All they want is just, from this point on, is just to use those cards. In some matter of using what you see here, just validating that the card is legit, and then entering the card into the access control, and from that point on, using the card as a prox card, like a proximity card like you'd see, or a smart card, as you see in any commercial application. We've seen that. And we've seen all the way to the other side of the spectrum where they want to do full validation because it's a high secure facility, or some place inside the facility that needs or has to have more restrictions, more security. Okay, so be aware of that. I know it's a lot. I'm going to stop here, open up for questions. There's no polls today, so we just going to open up, because I figure going more of this PowerPoint is just going to get you all numb, and I'll lose you from that point on. So I'll stop here in this session. We'll continue in my next session next Monday. I'll continue to dig more into the subject and show you more live. Hopefully, I'll be able to combine a little bit more live demonstration of this and a little bit of slides. So again, sorry for all the slides today. Let's see, do we have any questions? I guess I successfully put everyone to sleep. Okay, so we do have some questions here. So do we have a solution for truck gates entrance? Say like a truck driver use a TWIC card to enter a gate. It's difficult to get the rear close enough, right? We'll have to, Edwin, come back to us, talk to me if you could, please, or email me if you have a chance. We can talk about that. I'm thinking about maybe the mobile option. It might be something that we could use for this particular application, okay? So we need to understand a little bit more of your requirements. There might be an option to use the mobile application. Okay. Oh, I've seen here now my team is being busy. Thanks, guys. Wow, that was a lot of questions. Awesome. Okay. Rob, did I miss anything here? Let's see here. Okay, so we covered that your trucks. Okay, let's take a look at this one here. So, so you can mix and match the full check for, say, a visitor entrance and just a standard ACM pass track. Yes, if I understood your question here, right. So if you, let's say that I have this facility, which inside this facility I have a data center, and that is my nerve center. That is where I need to have extra security to get in that area. Maybe in the rest of the facility or in the main doors, I don't care so much. So in that case, I'm just going to use the card present, and at that point, it uses like just like your commercial credentials, your commercial cards. Just present the card, validate. Yes, this is in the access control, and yes, this person can come in. And then maybe to access the door of my data center, now I require a full-blown validation like you see here on screen, right? So I'll require you to enter the card, put a PIN number, and put your fingerprint. So HID makes those readers that have a slot so you can read the card, you can enter a PIN number and put your fingerprint, right? So you can do triple authentication if required, or just card and PIN if that's enough for that agency. And also we can validate a card at the beginning. So this process, obviously, for a situation like this is going to take longer, because now we're talking about, hey, I'm going to validate the card you're presenting here on this reader. I'm going to validate it before I can let you at the door. So just be aware of that. It could take a little longer to a couple of seconds to authenticate someone and open that door. Okay. Jeff, I hope I answered the question. So what's the report indicate specifically now? Contact tracing. Not sure if I understand what you're asking, but reporting wise in ACM for this, every time you present the card, and if it so happens that the card is not validated, it will, that is an option. You can do it or not. Obviously, you want to do that. There's an option in the PIV check to send the communication back to the access control as an alarm saying, hey, this card is not validated. The person will not come in, because the moment that you present the card, and let's say I'm using the authentication here and I'm going against the government database to validate the card before I let you come into the door, before I let the door be open, as soon as that card hits the database and it checks and the card comes back as stolen or invalid or revoked, in essence, the door is not opening. It doesn't even go to the access control. It's blocked right there. So the PAM sits in between the reader and the controller. And if you think about the LP4500, then that's the other option. The PAM is built in the controller, but basically sits in between the reader and the controller. So if the card is not validated, is not authentic, is not even, let's say, it's not even making to the access control if I don't want to. All right, I hope I answered that, Jeff. So John, in regards to dual authentication, there is different options out there for keypad and fingerprint. Really depends. I think we do have a couple options in our price list for that, but yeah, there's different options that you can use to do dual authentication. If you're talking about dual authentication, it would be basically the card and the PIN number. So that's somewhat easy, right? So you can use a HID PIV Class RPK40, for example, and that would provide some options. So be aware, please, if you're doing this, check with us, because just for PIV, just to give you an idea, that is how many? 700 readers, I think. 700 different combinations, 750, something like that, if I'm not mistaken. So there is a lot of different options. So please make sure that you check this with us before putting a proposal out there for government. Okay. All right. I think we got one last question here. All right, let me read this here. But if they do come through a mobile station, not sure I understood that, Jeff. You can come off mute if you want to, or just type it in here. If you have a person coming in to the facility, so the options are, so there's two things, right? You can validate the card. Maybe I didn't make that very clear. There's a couple of things in here. I can validate that person with that card without the access control. That's PIV check, okay, validation, which is this portion. I think I covered in this slide right here, this, okay? So this is the validation workstation. This is just to validate the person. Person comes into my lobby like I would do in a visitor management, right? Where I can read their license, driver's license, and put some information in there. This takes it to a whole new spin, right? So this will read the card, and you have to enter your PIN number and your fingerprint. And now I properly validate that person. And I can see the picture that is inside the card and validate. It's like, oh, okay, that's you. Here's your card back. You can come into the facility, right? So that's one approach. No access control. If you want to do the access control, then this there'll be an enrollment process which basically uses this validation workstation to authenticate that person. And then once that person is authenticated, then I can go in here and enter the person in the access control. Here's the same screen you saw before with that gentleman. Now is with Jerry. And now you can use that information and pass. Now that information is being authenticated, I can pass that and validate in the access control. Okay, great. Now I have this in the access control. Awesome. Now I can use the card to open doors in the facility because now he's in the access control. And how I'm going to accomplish that really depends. Once again, that was the example I was giving before. I have a data center inside the building, and in that particular door, I want to have triple authentication, and I'm going to check against customer database before I let someone in. It's going to take longer to authenticate. It's going to take longer to open that door, but it's something that I want because I want to make sure that that particular area is secured. Maybe the rest of the facility, I'm okay if you just present your card as and using that information, just using the card number like I would do in any access control system, right? So this part of the system here, which is basically a plugin running behind the scenes between the pivCLASS software and ACM. So this application will add that person, will add this card, this person here into access control. Okay. I hope I answered your question, Jeff. Let me know if I didn't. Is this solution only for federal agencies? That's a very good question. In most part, I would say, yeah, federal agents and contractors, right? Because this, the whole premise is I can authenticate or I can validate this credential against a customer database to ensure that, yes, this person holding this card is a rightful owner, right? So that's, I would say it is the approach of this, right? And any contractor would have the same thing. They'll have the same, they'll have a credential that would be validated against federal government. Okay. All right, I don't see any other questions in here, so I'll go ahead and let's see what we have for the next session. Hey, Steven, no problem, man. Rob, you there? If you are, you mute, my friend. Let's see. I think Rob is covering Wednesday now. He's covering Mercury controllers, the wiring and how to use it, and basically punch out where do you wire what, best practices. So it's a pretty good one for understanding a little bit more about the Mercury controllers and how they should be wired. Okay. And on Friday is Ryan Kavanagh. Ryan, are you online? Okay. I think Ryan is covering Friday. Ryan is covering also. We're kind of going to do a little bit of refreshing all the controllers for the access control, all the Mercury panels, and I think goes along with what Rob is going to show on Wednesday. So Wednesday, noon Central Time, Friday, noon Pacific Time. Okay? Folks, thanks so much for coming. That's it for today. Appreciate your coming in here and hope to see you on Wednesday. Have a great day, everyone.